the experience where some movie or TV show that we saw in childhood will randomly pop into our minds one day for no apparent reason, probably triggered by something in the subconscious, and you remember it and you think to yourself, was that real? Or was that just kind of some dream or distorted memory? And then you go to the internet to Google it and you look around and you find out, oh, yeah, sure enough, it was real. And then you remember it. I had this a couple weeks ago where I don't know why, but for whatever reason, popped into my mind this childhood memory where I don't know, I must have been around 7 years old, sometime in the mid 1980s. The babysitter, we had a regular babysitter while my mom was at work, and she was watching a movie about a guy on a spider web fighting a spider with a sword. Um, and I remember, I don't know why we came in near the end of that movie. We must have been playing outside or coming home from school, or who knows. And I remember that the babysitter said the movie was named The Thief of something. I didn't remember the full name. So with this memory just kind of resurfing, I Googled it and found, yeah, the movie is called The Thief of Baghdad, uh, produced all the way back in 1940, which is impressive given some of the special effects, I think. I mean, I don't know much about the history of special effects and cinematography, but my understanding is that a lot of films weren't doing this back in the 1940s. And there are not one, but several full copies of this movie available on YouTube. I don't know why. I don't think it's in the public domain. And this could be one of those things where in 6 months or in a year they'll all be taken down. But for the moment, they're up there, and I'll link to the copy that I watched in the description down below. If you've watched my movie reviews for the past couple years, you know that I don't really watch a lot of movies nowadays. I used to watch tons of movies, but life has caught up to me. I'm very busy. I've got two kids, and yeah. When I'm home after work, I'm busy watching the kids. I don't have time to queue up a 2 hour movie and just sit down. Plus, we don't want the kids watching a lot of TV. We're trying to reduce their screen time, all that stuff. The other thing, which I've mentioned before, if you've watched this channel, is access to movies is an issue. I'm living out here in Vietnam. I don't have any access to DVD rentals. We don't have Netflix or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty much just limited to the movies that happen to get posted on YouTube. But when this was posted on YouTube, when I noticed this was posted on YouTube, I made a mental note to myself to next time I have free time to watch a movie, this might be a good one to cue in on that slot. And sure enough, last night I actually had some time. The kids were out of the house, and I was able to put on the movie and watch it. And we'll talk about my review now. I largely enjoyed it. I skipped over a part. When I first discovered the movie, and I was thinking, okay, do I actually want to sit through the full 2 hours? Because, parts of it looked impressive, but it was a 1940s movie. And I think we've all had the experience of watching an old movie and feeling like it was paced a lot slower than we're used to nowadays. And, it's good to watch old movies for cultural reasons and stuff like that, but they can be a bit of a slog to sit through. So, as you sometimes do in YouTube, I was skipping around to random parts of the movie to see if the whole thing looked interesting. I mean, I knew the giant spider scene would be interesting, but what about the rest of the movie? And wherever I clicked, anywhere on the movie, it looked really exciting at any given point. There was always some kind of big set piece, there was always some dramatic music, there always seemed to be something big happening. There didn't seem to be a lot of down points in the movie. That's when you're just clicking on random scenes. Now, when you actually sit down and watch the whole 2 hours, actually, I think it's an hour 40, something like that. Some of the individual scenes drag on a bit, well, what do you expect? It's a 1940s movie. They're not cut and paste quite as much as a movie. Sorry, quite the same way as a movie nowadays. But overall, it holds up remarkably well, and by that I mean it appeals to the modern sensibilities remarkably well. The only other big complaint I have, before I get into all my little minor complaints, is that the plot of the movie is how to describe this? It's one of those movies where the lovers meet, and then they get separated, and then they have to overcome obstacles, and they meet again, and then they get separated again, and then they meet up again. So it's a little bit repetitive, instead of like more of a classic 3-act structure where you're working up towards a climax. There are more mini climaxes in the movie, and a little bit, maybe a little bit of a frustration that this plot keeps doubling back on itself. But, excuse me, that's a minor complaint. On the whole, it holds up really well. It's got this wonderful fantasy storybook feeling, and the sets are really great. And now you look at the sets, and a lot of times you can tell that there's a green screen or a blue screen, or one shot being pasted on top of another, or there's a painting in the background instead of it being like a real background. But you don't really care. They're all meant to evoke images straight out of a fairy tale. And a lot of great little moments in here. I mentioned the spider scene earlier. That's a classic. There's a big giant genie who shows up. There's a flying carpet. There's there's all these great little moments which keep the movie exciting. And again, considering it came out in the 1940s, it largely holds up by the standards of today's pacing. The beginning especially moves at a very fast clip, where we're kind of going through all these scenes. It does slow down a little bit in the middle, in my opinion, but then picks up again at the end. So the little bit of background on this movie. The Thief of Baghdad, as you can probably tell from the title, this is an Arabian Nights-esque story. I think according to Wikipedia, it wasn't based directly on any of the stories in Arabian Nights, but based on the idea of the story of Arabian Nights. Flying carpets, genie, sultans, princesses, that whole type of thing. I wonder a little bit if a movie like this could get made nowadays, because it is, I think, a classic example of what Edward Said would have described as Orientalism. But it's, on the other hand, these Arabian Night stories are such a genre onto themselves. There's always I think there's an agreement between the storyteller and the viewer that this is just complete fantasy. In the same way that Lord of the Rings is based on like Germanic mythology, but it's not supposed to be an accurate representation of the Germanic peoples. It's just pure fantasy mythology. I think I don't know. Let me know what you think. I certainly watching the movie. And if you haven't seen it, go check it out. There's several copies available on YouTube at the moment. Um, Watching the movie, you can't help but be reminded of Disney's Aladdin, the 1992 animated Aladdin, in a way that, not in a general way, but in a very specific way. Like, okay, when they were making Aladdin, they definitely ripped off this scene. So the title character, the thief of Baghdad, starts out kind of in the marketplace, stealing food not for himself but to give to hungry people, just like in Disney's Aladdin. And then he gets chased by the townspeople, and he's running up the stairs and climbing up the ladders and hiding in the big vases, the big kind of clay pots, just like in Disney's Aladdin. And then the evil Vizier is named Jaffar, which is only kind of one vowel sound off from Jafar in Disney's Aladdin. And the father of the princess has like a white beard exactly like the one in Disney's Aladdin, and the prince is in love with the princess, and he's got the Vizier has magic powers, and the thief, who is somewhat of a sidekick and somewhat of the main character, I'll get into that later, is named Abu. And at a certain point, you're like, okay, this is not just a little bit of borrowing. So sure enough, I went to Wikipedia, and if you look up the Thief of Baghdad on Wikipedia, it's straight up acknowledged that the Disney animators were borrowing from this. I believe the term is they were paying homage to it, because they weren't even trying to hide what they were borrowing. Disney's Aladdin was almost like a remake of the Thief of Baghdad in a way. I mean, a lot of differences as well, but they were definitely using that as their template. This is one of those famous classic films that's influenced a bunch of subsequent films. So yeah, that was interesting. I never knew that. It would be interesting. Maybe I'll throw this out to you guys in the comments section. What's your history with this movie? Have you seen it before? Have you never heard of it before? Were you aware that Disney's Aladdin was based off of this movie, etc.? I mean, like I mentioned, I saw part of it as a child when it was on TV in the 1980s. But I think in the 1980s, these older movies were still being reshown on TV. I don't think. I mean, TV nowadays is so different than it was in my childhood, huh? With a whole bunch of different cable channels and satellite subscriptions and stuff like that. But I think the era of just kind of randomly stumbling across this movie when you turn off on the TV, that era is gone, right? With the baby boomers now being quite older, these old movies aren't being re-shown as much as they used to be, etc. But sorry, the point I wanted to make in bringing all of that up is certainly by the 1990s it was still okay to redo these Arabian Nights fantasies, and in fact they just remade Disney's Aladdin, right? I tend to forget about that, but they had the Will Smith remake. What was that, 2 or 3 years ago, of Disney's Aladdin? So these, I guess we are still making these movies. This movie is, according to Wikipedia, a remake of a 1924 movie starring Douglas Fairbanks, which I have not seen, but which is on Wikipedia. I don't know, maybe I should have seen the Douglas Fairbanks movie first, but I didn't. I think the 1940 version is more famous. The Douglas Fairbanks is a silent movie, so I don't know if that would have been a little bit more difficult for me to sit through, given my attention span is just as poor as anyone else of the modern age. Um, but one of the big changes that the 1940 movie made is they split the protagonist into two. So in the apparently in the 1924 movie, Douglas Fairbank was the prince who also became a thief. So he and the also the guy who was getting the princess. The 1940s movie splits it into two. There's the Prince of Baghdad, and then there's his friend, the thief. And the two of them are going off on adventures together. So the protagonist has been split into two different parts. There's the guy who's romancing the girl, and then there's the mischievous thief. Which I didn't know that before I did a little bit of research on the internet, but while I was watching the movie, it's one of those things that makes perfect sense once you learn it. Because when you're watching the movie, it's a little bit strange. You're like, oh, okay, wait. Who is our protagonist here? Who is the main character? We're especially at the beginning, you kind of start off with both of them kind of in beginning in different places, and later they join up together. But even throughout the movie, I'm not saying it's bad, but it's a little bit different than our expectations for a single protagonist to have these two different protagonists. Apparently, and again, I'm getting all my information from the internet, the reason that they did this was because the director wanted to use one of his favorite child stars, which was a young Indian actor named Sabu. I'd invite you to click on some of these Wikipedia links yourself and do some of your own research if you're interested, because it does look pretty interesting. And I've not read everything thoroughly because these reviews tend to be somewhat off the cuff. I'm just watched the movie last night. I'm filming this morning, and then I'm off to work in 30 minutes or so. So that doesn't. I make no claim to have researched everything thoroughly. But yeah, from the brief thing that I looked up on Sabu, it does look pretty interesting. He was a child actor from India who eventually got American citizenship. He was in a bunch of old movies. He was in the 1942 version of The Jungle Book, which I think I saw way back in the day. It looks like most of these he was playing the little Indian boy in whatever role they had for him. And he had been previously working with the director in another film, which was The Elephant Boy, I think, was one of these talented kid actors who could play the lovable child quite well. He was 13 or 14 when they filmed this movie. According to the internet, they had to reshoot parts of it because he grew 3 inches during the delay in the filming. But he's a teenager on the cusp of adulthood, but still young enough to portray a young teenager in this movie, and completely charming. Does the role very well. My only criticism is his laugh. He's constantly like laughing at the world or laughing at his tricks. And the actor is able to do a genuine laugh sometimes, but sometimes it's very apparent that he's doing a fake laugh in a way that I don't know if that played better in 1940. It's a little bit distracting, I think, to modern sensibilities. To be fair, he's not the only one in the movie who's guilty of that. The actor who's playing the genie also is not very good at pretending to laugh. I guess you just have to go along with it. But yeah, so you have one who's the mischievous little thief, and then you got have the other guy who's in love with the princess, and they're helping each other on their respective quests. The thief is out for adventure. The prince is trying to romance the princess, and then the antagonist is Jafar, who, just like Disney's Aladdin, has magical powers. I mean, another little nitpick you could make of this film is Jaffar's powers seem to be used inconsistently. So early on in the movie, or I guess maybe midway through the movie, by the way, spoilers. Jafar is able to use his powers, his magical powers, to cause one of the characters to become blind, and another character to turn into a dog. And he doesn't need like a magic wand or a special potion to do this. He's just able to hold up his hands and say, okay, now you will be a dog, or now you will be blind. So it seems like it's kind of unlimited magical powers, which later on in the movie, in parts when he would seem to need those powers, he doesn't use. So you can dock a point off this movie for having the bad guy have vaguely undefined magical powers that come in and out at the plot's convenience. But yeah, he's the main antagonist, and most of the movie is spent trying to get the prince together with the princess, and overcome various obstacles. The film, I mentioned earlier that the settings are really gorgeous. A point I forgot to mention earlier is the colors are really great in this film. It's from 1940, but it's not a black and white film. It's a color film. I think one of the earliest color films. I don't quite know what the technology is, but it's got those really bright colors that you see in old films like The Wizard of Oz, etc. The whatever color technique they were using in that era. And like I mentioned before, the sets, although sometimes you can tell that there's just a painting in the background, etc., have a really lovely fairy tale-esque quality to them. This is, I don't know if you want to dock a point for this or not, but this is another one of those movies where the prince and the princess meet for like 2 seconds and then fall instantly in love and are declaring their love to each other forever. This is one of those things that Disney it's like a meme to criticize Disney movies for this. In fact, it's become so much of a meme that I mean, you know this as well as I do. Disney movies themselves have started referencing it, like the movie Frozen or the movie Enchanted have parodied the earlier Disney movies where characters fall in love at first sight. But this is an interesting reminder that Disney did not invent this trope. And in fact, a couple of years ago on this channel, I reviewed the Brothers Grimm fairy tale collection. That trope is all over those fairy tales as well. So you accept this story as a fairy tale. According to Wikipedia, this film was produced with the hopes of targeting both child and family audience, like something that would appeal to child and adults. I'm not exactly sure how this would have played to an audience in the 1940s who again, would presumably be a little bit less desensitized to movie magic than we are. But I speaking as an adult in the modern era, I thought it largely worked. There were a few scenes that seemed a little bit too childish to appeal to adults. I'm thinking maybe of the Sultan and his fascination with all these toys. That's the princess's father, plays a sultan who is fascinated by toys. According to Wikipedia, this is yet another thing that Disney's Aladdin borrowed. Although I'll be honest, I don't actually remember that part from Disney's Aladdin. I'm probably overdue for a rewatch of that movie. But was the Sultan Jasmine's father in Disney's Aladdin? Was she also fascinated by toys? Sorry, was he also fascinated by toys? Um, Apparently, that's a detail that's borrowed from the Thief of Baghdad. But yeah, those scenes in the toy room seem a little bit too corny, a little bit too childish. Although, judged from the standards of a children's movie, it works perfectly fine. Um, yeah, what else do I want to say about this movie? I don't know. It's the problem with doing these things unscripted. I had a feeling there was more I wanted to say. Um, but yeah, maybe I'll just leave it there. Oh, sorry. I just thought of a couple more things. I completely forgot to mention this, but this is a British movie. It's not an American movie. Um, I had kind of had the idea in my head that British movies weren't very good in this era. But I think this is an era. This movie was as good as anything the American studios were producing. It was done by a guy named Alexander Korda, who was an Hungarian-born British film director. I think this is the film that he had the most success with in the United States. So it was a cross-Atlantic hit at the time. The I maybe jumping back to a point I touched on earlier about Orientalism or the racial element to this movie. The one of the main characters, Sabu, is an Indian. So I maybe we give this film progressive points for having a person of color in the movie. Now, he does not get the girl, and I'm not sure if the racial element of it was one reason they split the protagonist into two parts. Although I think it probably had more to do with the fact that he was a child than he was an Indian. Who knows? The ending scene has a battle with the palace guards, who are all black. Now, I don't think you have to make this racial. I think you could say, well, they just happen to be black and they're guarding the palace because that's their job. Although it is maybe a sad reminder of how limited the roles were for black actors at this time, right? So if you were a black person in the film industry, you would have very limited hopes of getting the leading role in the movie. But if you want to play like the henchman of the bad guy, those are the parts for you. It's a little bit sad how limited those actors were and the roles available to them, but I think it's not new information, right? It's something we all know. Well, I'm mentioning it. Those sword fights at the end are maybe another weak point of the movie if you want to take a point off. So I don't really know anything about cinematography or fight choreography or whatever, but whatever's going on, it was a little bit off. It was just a little bit too fake, where the sword was being swung a little bit too slow, and it was just a little obvious that everyone's reaction times were in slow motion, and where the sword wasn't actually hitting somebody, but he fell down dead anyways. I know that they did have much better action scenes in this, because that old Robin Hood movie from the 1940s has much better, tighter, faster paced action scenes. So it could be done during this period. But the sword fights and stuff like that are not the movie's strength. But what is maybe the movie's strength is the various fantastic locations and the various different creatures, the giant genie, the giant spider, the temple that the thief goes into to steal the all-seeing eye. Those are all quite fun to watch. So I I I think this movie is worth checking out, and it's on YouTube at the moment. So go ahead and check it out. And I'm gonna sign off here because I've got to go to work. So talk to you later.